Uh, Good evening, Dr. Srinivas here, and gives me great pleasure to share my knowledge about urticaria. Urticaria is a problem which you will start facing right from the day one you start your postgraduate course. Maybe you might have seen it even during your general practice or MBBS days. It does not kill a person, but does not let a person live comfortably also. It's very disturbing, and it is much more disturbing when the child gets it because parents feel very restless. Medicines have to be taken for a long time, and there are genuine concerns with regard to the safety of the medicine which the person is asked. Even some persons will tell them, if you take this, kidney will go off, that will go off, and all these sort of ideas are put into the patient. Likewise, they listen to people who tell, don't take non-veg, don't take this diet, don't take sour things. And this sort of confusion exists in the mind. So our duty is to one, educate the person, about this condition, and try to treat it to the best of our ability. And I will tell you the counseling the way I do it. Well, this urticaria is a thing I have lived with, in the sense my patient get it, my father-in-law had it, my wife had it, and so every day, and it lasted. It lasted also. Every day I said, "What doctor you are? Urticaria is still there. I'm getting this thing." So I sort of lived with urticaria, and so I know the pain that a person goes through, the disturbance it causes. And each day they will come, today I found out this is the cause, today I found out that is the cause, and they will stop taking that food item. It can be classified. Anything less than 6 weeks is considered acute. Anything more than that is considered as chronic. Now, this is a very arbitrary classification, but probably because in case of children, where infection could be the cause, we could call it as acute. The chronic has got many names like chronic idiopathic, chronic spontaneous. Chronic spontaneous may be a slightly better term than idiopathic in the sense it is not idiopathic. IgE is involved, so it cannot be idiopathic. Only thing is we don't know what it is. So spontaneous might be a slightly better terminology, but it is just fighting terminology and doesn't mean too much. It could be physical urticaria. Then, of course, we can get urticarial vasculitis, which is little more severe type. And sometimes we can get contact urticaria, which can be both IgE mediated and non-IgE mediated. I'm not going to deal with that too much. And then we can get angioedema. 30% of the urticaria will be accompanied by angioedema. And sometimes we can get angioedema without urticaria itself as a sole presentation. Both are same. When it occurs at a superficial level, it is urticaria. When it occurs at a deeper level, it is angioedema. When there is more itching and all in urticaria, here there will be more burning and sometimes pain sensation can be there. This is the molecule which causes all this issue, the IgE, the main player behind the scene. This IgE molecule, they can get bound to the mast cell. So mast cell and basophils, these are the two cells that are mainly involved in the urticaria. And once the IgE goes and joins the receptor and it is activated by the antigen, it stimulates the mast cell to secrete the various contents it has. So mast cell has various gets activated. Mast cell gets activated by the antigen, which binds to the IgE molecule, which binds to the epsilon receptors on the mast cell, and it gets activated. And the mast cell has got many mediators. Some are immediate, like histamine. They contain histamine, and they're released immediately. And then other mediators are manufactured at the same time. This is mediated, and others are, and this is responsible for various things like rashes, wheezing, vomiting, pain abdomen. All those things are because of the histamine as well as the other mediators. So once the histamine is liberated, which is the first one, it acts on the cutaneous blood vessel, leading to the dilatation of the blood vessels. And dilatation of the blood vessels leads to extravasation of fluid, which leads to the urticarial rash, which we see. So it is a histamine mediated rash, and it acts on the nerve endings and causes itching. So here is a better this thing. There are triggers. This trigger can be many. It can be infection, it can be allergen, it can be this thing, it can be autoantibodies. In fact, in most cases, we won't know. So what we tell the person is that your body is a big factory, and in this factory, many proteins are made and many proteins are broken down. And to any one of this, you're possibly allergic. There is no way by which we'll be at ease. In most cases, we'll be able to find out what is the cause of urticaria. But this is how it acts. It acts on the mast cells, and the mast cell liberates the various factors such as histamine, prostaglandins, cytokines, and these are responsible for the recruitment of the leukocytes. So the neutrophils come in over there. The neutrophil liberate various factors, and that attracts the eosinophils, and of course the basophils too, and that acts on the blood vessel. And the basophils are used up, leading to basopenia. And as the urticaria improves, the basopenia also is said to improve, but rarely do we keep track of the basophil count. Now, let me tell you about mast cell. Like the other day when I talked about Parthenium, I had explained this. Mast cell has got mediators, as I told you. And it is like something like a house, somewhere an unexpected guest comes. And when an unexpected guest comes, immediately the mother or the wife, whoever is there, they have to take care of the guest. So in the refrigerator, there is cooked food over there, cooked cool juice, so whatever cool drinks are there, and that is served immediately. And then further food is cooked like Jetafix does. Unfortunately, it is not like Dobby, who can click the hand. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Harry Potter and Asterix Obelix. I am a fan of that. And Dobby is a character, by which clicking the hand, he can get the food. That doesn't happen. It has to be cooked like Druid Jetafix. And once it is cooked, then it is released. So these mediators are released subsequently, and they are the various other mediators which are the newly formed from the arachidonic. They follow the lipooxygenase pathway, and then they follow the cyclooxygenase pathway. The other mediators which are liberated are the proteases, the cytokines, the platelet attracting factor, the various factors, IL-4, growth factors, so many are there which are attracted. This lipooxygenase and cycloogenase pathway is slightly important, so let me dwell on this. So from the arachidonic acid, we get both lipooxygenase and we get cyclooxygenase pathway. So when we take some painkillers, when we take painkillers, it goes and blocks the cyclooxygenase pathway by which the thromboglandin, thrombosin are not produced. So what happens? All the raw material is available for the lipooxygenase pathway, and the leukotrienes are formed and various cytokines are liberated. This is why in the case of urticaria, we give a painkiller, you will find that there is worsening. And for the treatment of that, one is you give antihistamines. I'm telling some of this because I may forget afterwards. One is you give antihistamines well before you first advise a person to avoid any painkillers and anti-inflammatories. And if it is a must, then you give the antihistamines well before the person takes the painkillers. Alternatively, you can avoid, and sometimes you can get away with steroids. Fluperitin can be given, but that is by a different pathway. You can try morphinoid derivatives, but sometimes morphinoid derivatives itself can stimulate. So you'll have to try one by one what causes it. We can also demonstrate this urticaria by a test known as prick testing. Unfortunately, prick testing is not commonly done, and it should be a part of the management of urticaria. Not that it is always going to give result, but in some cases it is going to give results. And in those cases where you find that by prick testing you're able to prove the allergen, it's really very, you feel very happy and thrilled when you find that you're able to identify the cause, because that is the only time in the case of urticaria by which, by your treatment, by stopping that allergen, the person is going to improve dramatically. So this prick test, when we do, two things occurs. This, of course, with histamine we do. Immediate reaction occurs from the histamine, the release. When the histamine releases, we get the wheal and the flare, which you are able to see over there. This is the immediate phase of the type 1 reaction. Then what happens? The other mediators are produced, which I told you, the prostaglandins, the platelet activating factors, all those various other factors are, and they are released one by one, slowly. And so this continues. So we get a late phase reaction, which can start somewhere 6 to 48 hours after that. So when you're doing prick testing, And this is where we have proved in case of Parthenium. Parthenium can also cause urticaria-like lesion. It can cause type 1 type of hypersensitivity. And here in Parthenium, we were able to prove that we are getting the type 1. And after about 48 hours, we were able to get the late phase reaction. So wherever it is activated, wherever the mast cell is activated, there is a possibility. In most cases, you will find that the immediate occurs, late phase does not occur. But in those cases where you find that those who are not responding to antihistamines, or if a person is already on antihistamines, antihistamine only will block the immediate reaction, but will not block the late phase reaction, because that is not histamine mediated, and which is why it does not work. The antihistamines does not work when there is a late phase reaction. This is what we reported in case of Parthenium dermatitis, and it has been reported with chrysanthemum. It can be inhaled, it can cause urticaria-like lesions. Now, what is the etiology of urticaria? As I said, idiopathic. Idiopathic is not a very proper word. Spontaneous would have been a better word. Then, of course, infection can cause, most often viral, which is self-limiting. If you do a blood test and you find that there is more amount of lymphocyte count, then most likely you are dealing with a viral count. If there is a more neutrophil count in the blood test, then possibly you are dealing with a infection. And if you find more eosinophils, then infestation. But that is not such a common thing, but rarely that can give a clue. So you can do a blood test in some of these cases, especially in case of children, where it is often self-limiting because the virus goes off, the antigens are not there, and the person improves. Then, of course, it could be autoimmune type of allergic. The non-allergic drugs can cause urticaria. We'll discuss about that more. And of course, in pregnancy, we can get PUPP, which is an urticaria-like reaction. So this is what happens in a case of mast cells which are activated. The granules are released, histamines are released, cytokines are released, arachidonic platelet activating factor, the cyclooxygenase pathway, and the lipooxygenase pathway, which gives rise to the leukotrienes. So what are the clinical features of urticaria? Persons with urticaria will come with itching. And most of them believe that they're very unique in having got urticaria. The first thing you have to tell them that this is a very common condition. Billions of people are getting this condition, and all of them get well. And so you too will get well. Relax is the first thing you tell the person as soon as they come. And the clinical features you will see is wheals, which can be small, which can be large, which can be bizarre shaped, which can involve large areas. And these people tend to rub rather than scratch. But don't totally rely on that. None of these things are 100% true. There can be cases of urticaria where there can be large areas of excoriation, scratch marks. You can get, say, especially following insect bite or something, you can get a lot of scratch marks. But in most cases, these people tend to rub rather than scratch, as in lichen planus. Then, of course, we can get angioedema. I already told you it is in the soft tissue areas. There is a swelling over there. It is much deeper. The pathomechanism is the same thing, but it is much deeper and takes longer to resolve. Urticaria can also be physical urticaria. There are various physical urticaria like cholinergic urticaria, acetylcholine urticaria. When a person does exercise, then acetylcholine gets released from the nerve ending, and that can cause cholinergic urticaria. Cold urticaria can occur. Aquagenic urticaria can be there. Solar urticarias, the UV rays can cause, even visible rays can cause, infrared rays can aggravate the urticaria. So we can even find out as to which ray is exactly causing the solar urticaria. And we have done some studies on that, and I will share those things with you. So this is a line diagram of a solar simulator. A solar simulator is one which delivers the spectrum of a sun through a small window. It will have the visible light, it will have the infrared, it will have the ultraviolet light. It passes through copper sulfate solution in sulfuric acid, and the infrared, that is the heat causing infrared, is absorbed, and what is released at the end, what is a person is exposed to, I'll show you in the next diagram how it looks. That is the nozzle where you see, and the person what is exposed to is minus the infrared, because infrared is heat. A person is exposed to the whole spectrum. Here we have got various filters we can put. From the filter, first we can cut off the ultraviolet A rays by using a filtrum. Then we can cut off different part of the B rays, and we can study and find out to which spectrum, which rays a person is developing the urticaria. And for visible light, although visible light is there in this, there is no way you can cut off the visible light and let the ultraviolet A inside. So for visible light, we used to use the light from the slide projector, which used to have those days. Even now, the present slide projectors, but they are LED lights, I'm not too certain. We used to use the slide projector for the visible light to demonstrate urticaria. So this is how we do the test. We expose a person to the whole spectrum, then to whole spectrum minus UVA, and then that will be UVB, and then UVA alone. UVB alone. We expose the person to various type of light. The whole spectrum minus UVB, and then UVA. This is how we can expose the person and find out to which one a person is allergic to. And this is what we published then way back in the year 1995, where we did the studies with solar urticaria, and subsequently also we had tested in other patients. And we found that for the treatment, a combination of, we tried the various antihistamines, almost all were nearly equally good. Some blocked a little earlier, some were a little late, but we were able to find that a combination of H1 and H2 was better than H1 alone. Then, of course, one of the most disturbing physical urticaria is dermographism. The person will come and say, when I scratch, there occurs lines. This can occur, it's a physical urticaria that may accompany the urticaria, or it can occur de novo by itself as a physical urticaria. And this will occur as a red line, and the person gets very disturbed. So what do you tell this person? I'm telling some of the counseling now itself. What do you tell this person? That this is because of triple response of Levy, and that it is very essential for the survival. We don't know why it has become more, only it knows why it has become more. It will come back to normal eventually. That knows when it is going to come back. Until that time, you require treatment, is the thing, and they have to continue treatment. It can be symptomatic, it can be asymptomatic. Asymptomatic means no itching. You don't need any treatment for that. Whereas symptomatic, they will require treatment, but nobody buys that. You tell them yours is asymptomatic, they will not, because the person, by the time they have come to you, they have decided that they want treatment, that they're not going to go back without treatment. And then we did studies to find out which antihistamine is effective, and we found that ketotifen is one of the most effective because it has the ability of stabilizing the mast cell. What we did was we took one of the grades which Dr. Pasricha had made this thing to measure the pressure in case of Hansen's. We sort of reversed that, and we applied different degrees of pressure with that to find out whether which antihistamine was able to give relief, and we found that ketotifen was able to block the physical urticaria, that is the dermographism. And this one, again, let me tell you, a lot of persons in your day-to-day practice will come to you with itching on the head. And that is, in many of those cases, you will find that there is no scaling, nothing over there. Many of those cases are because of dermographism. If you scratch on the hand, you may find that they have got dermographism. Many patients with dermographism will tell about itching on the head, and you will think there are two different entities. No, they will scratch on the head. Only thing is dermographism on the head cannot be seen. There will be itching, they will scratch more, there will be more dermographism, and the itch scratch cycle will continue, and they will respond to antihistamines. And then, of course, this is one of the few cases where we struck gold, wherein a person came with told that, see, it is this way. Out of 500 patients of urticaria, one patient will come and tell you, if I have this, I get urticaria. They know. Your job is only to confirm. They have already found out that this is. When a person is telling, I can get to this, I can get to katrikai, I can get to baigan, I can get to lady's finger, I can get to chicken, I can get. If they have multiple choices, then all choices are wrong. If a person comes to you with one single culprit, then there is 80 to 90% chance that he is. And this patient came to us and told us that when he takes wheat, he gets urticaria. So we tested with the wheat. Wheat, gives rise to many. We get flour, we get dalia, we get maida, suji, wheat bran, roti, bread. All these are made with wheat. We tested with all this, and we were able to prove that the person is. And then he stopped wheat, and he had already stopped. We told him, yes, you have got allergy to wheat. You cannot take wheat. And so we. And even when we gave him an oral challenge, we were able to demonstrate by oral challenge, we were able to demonstrate the urticaria. Then, of course, we have found urticaria to grapes. Of course, to latex, it is known. To banana, we have seen urticaria, where a person used to take banana, he used to get urticaria. I have seen urticaria to celery, wherein in celery we had fruit. But as I told you, these are extremely rare cases, but it is only by prick testing you can find out the proof of this. So it is not that there is no cause. It is not that allergy does not occur. It's not that we cannot find the cause. You have to have your eyes and ears open for that place where the cause can be found. But in most cases, we cannot find the cause. This is another very interesting cases where a person told us about ant bite. So ant, Hymenoptera, it has Formidaceae and it can cause urticaria. So we took that ant and poor ant, we divided it into three parts, the head part, the thorax part and the tail part, and we did the prick testing. And you can see that the tail part gave a strong one head, whereas in the middle, the urticaria was much, much less. So these are the various antigens which are reported: phospholipase, hyaluronidase, antigen 5. It was done long time ago, so I don't remember the exact details. At that time, I had read it up a lot. And then we found that it is not the ant bite that causes urticaria. It is the ant sting that is much more, because it is the tail portion of the ant that injects the allergen into the body, which causes not only urticaria, can even cause anaphylaxis. Then, of course, we have seen urticarial vasculitis of infants. This is acute hemorrhagic edema. Not really, but you will get confused because it is urticaria. This is more like henoch-Schönlein purpura. Now, when a person comes with urticaria, you have to ask the history. But in practice, rarely you will get a chance to ask the history. These persons are like a dam which is going to burst. They will be standing from the door, they will start talking. The parents will start talking. It is a dam that is going to burst. In fact, they are holding themselves out in the waiting room, and the minute they come, they start pouring out what they have. So it is better for you to let them sit down, you also to lean back, listen to them. For you, the story might be familiar, but they are telling it, in fact, for the first time to the doctor. Listen to them. So you have many questions. 70 to 80 to 90% of the questions which you are going to, so you have to keep your ears tuned. They will tell you how long, they will tell you they had in the past and how it went off, why it went off, what made it more, all those various things. When it comes, in the morning it comes, in the night it comes, does it become any more, everything they will be able to tell you if you let them talk for 5 minutes, and then you pull out what is there, then find out what they have not told, and then ask pointed questions. Otherwise, if you sit with a sheet and start asking questions, you won't get the answers in patients with urticaria. Some will have constitutional symptoms, some angioedema. Sometimes some will forget about angioedema because it would have occurred long ago. So in all cases of urticaria, if they don't mention angioedema, you will have to ask. Then you will have to ask about other allergies, whether they have got sneezing, wheezing. But atopy is not usually associated with urticaria, but drug allergies can be. So you'll have to ask. And of course, you'll have to ask about stress. Does it become more when there is a period stress or exam stress, or anything can become more? Stress is a very, very important cause, not only of causing urticaria, but aggravating urticaria. And rarely we can get various other side effects can be there, where other systemic complaints can be there. Ask about whether they are taking laxatives, because many people are constipated. They will take laxatives. Then some will have pain abdomen. The minute the person comes and sits in front of you, you can look at their face. You can look at that sort of stress they are in, and you will know that they are going to have gastritis. They are going to have hyperacidity. You can look and tell these sort of persons. And many of these persons would have tried, avoiding many food items. They would have served. So you have to listen to them to find out what all food items they have avoided, because that has to be used later for the counseling when you're going to tell them that food items are not important. Then, of course, it can occur at the sites of pressure where you have the tie, this thing. It can occur at the underwear or the pant where you can. Sometimes you can get burning sensation. In case of urticarial vasculitis, we can get purpura. Otherwise, normally we don't get purpura. And when we get purpura, when we get vasculitis, we may get post-inflammatory, but that become urticarial vasculitis or late phase urticarial reaction. So as I told you, why we should do blood. Urine, of course, is optional. Stool, of course. Thyroid functions you can do. Many persons are likely to have hypothyroidism. You detect thyroid abnormality in persons with urticaria, but treating that does not make it go. Although there are some studies wherein they gave the supplementation and person improved. Then you can do ANA. If you get ANA positive, especially you get more than 1+. 1+ you can get in many persons, but more than 1+, if you get 2+ positive, then it is worthwhile doing a ANA profile in those cases to see if they are having something. But even if they're having one ANA, obviously One ANA also is an antigen against something in the nucleus. So it can cause urticaria. In those persons who have got ANA positive, it's worthwhile considering hydroxychloroquine. Not immediately. If they do not respond, and then you could consider adding that rather than going on adding steroids or increasing the dose of antihistamines. It is worthwhile trying the hydroxychloroquine in those cases. Then prick tests, I told you, rarely you can do hepatitis B, hepatitis C. This can cause in case of chronic urticaria. RAST is something we don't recommend. ASST, autologous serum testing, we used to do with lot of excitement those days. Then it has fallen into disuse. We don't do it anymore. And at that time, it was even used for treatment. The autologous serum was used as a treatment for urticaria, saying that it is poor man's biologics, but not really. And then in some cases, you can do a complement level. You can find C4 is regressed in some cases, C5 is regressed in some cases. So this is how we do the test, prick test in those cases. So prick testing is you put the drop of the antigen which is required. So in selected cases who do not have dermographism, who are not on antihistamines, you can do the prick test, and this should be done rarely. Like as I told you, if 100 patient comes, the 101st patient may require the prick testing. Or where you suspect insect bites can be, you get prurigo simplex and urticaria. In those cases, you could do with the insect antigens, or you could do with the drugs in case you have them. So what you do is you put a drop of this. You have a positive control with histamine. We have a normal control with normal saline, and then you put the antigen which for which you are testing. Insert the lancet in so as to not to draw the blood. Just raise it, tent it up by tilting it up. Bring your finger down, enter, raise it a bit, bring it down, pull it out, and that is the way you do the prick testing. Virtually, the person does not feel, so we say, but once when I had a nasal allergy, they did it for me, and feel we do. So this is the AST which was being tried, and the ASD has been found positive in many other conditions, not unique to urticaria. It has been found even in normal healthy controls. AST has been this thing, and I have got AST positive in Henoch-Schönlein purpura also, where we did a study, but unfortunately we could not get that one published. So, having said so much about urticaria, what causes the urticaria, what could be the etiologic factors of urticaria, now we come to the management and the treatment of urticaria. As I said, these persons have first come to talk, then they have come to listen. These are the two things which you have to do. So, you will have to talk, and you will have to plan your talk in such a way that you don't hurt their feelings, don't hurt them. So, you will have to tell about and each person, the counseling is going to be different depending on the personality of the individual. So according to that, you will have to tell them about it, and treatment in some cases, especially in dermographism, even cooling lotions like menthol is enough, because there is no use taking an antihistamine after urticaria occurs. This is one of the things you must tell them, because antihistamine takes 1 to 1.5 hours to go off. Urticaria goes off in half an hour to 45 minutes. So antihistamines have got preventive action. What has come is not going to go, but it is going to prevent the next attack from coming. So in dermographism and physical urticaria, it is going to go within 15 minutes. So giving oral antihistamine over there is not really required unless it is very severe, requiring long-term antihistamine. There you can go for some menthol preparation and try to manage in those cases. So we are in a crossroad as to how to proceed when it comes to urticaria, treatment with urticaria. Rare cases when it is, of course, very severe with angioedema, anaphylaxis, then we'll have to go for adrenaline. Otherwise, in most cases, H1 antihistamine, that too, the non-sedative one like loratadine, desloratadine, levocetirizine, fexofenadine, bipolastin, bilastine, all these, and basically at the end of the day, there is nothing much to choose between these two. Maybe some have got little more anti-inflammatory action, some have got little sedative action. But having said that, this sedative action, this anti-inflammatory action varies from individual to individual. The absorption varies from individual to individual. There are some who will be having sedation with fexofenadine, but they won't be with levocetirizine. So it is a highly individualistic. So you will have to find out as to what antihistamine that person is tolerating. And one of the best way to find out is find out what that person has been taking. Because very rarely, because you are a specialist. So by the time a person comes to you, they would have consulted so many people. So go through the chit, find out what they have taken, ask them what was the effect of that, how long they were getting remission. You just don't have to change the other person's prescription. If that prescription is good enough, you can tell that doctor has given you the right medicine. This is the right medicine. Only thing is you should not stop, and you can ask them to continue that. So antihistamines, as I told you, is this thing, and if it doesn't work, you can try doubling. You can give a higher dose, one dose higher you can start, but still, I personally prefer to give another antihistamine, because in my case, you find that one antihistamine works in one person, another antihistamine works in another person. That means doubling means I could have got away by using another antihistamine. So I don't much like doubling, but rarely I do go in for it when I feel that it can be considered. So it is an option to be considered where I can go up to double. And if it doesn't work, then I go for a H2 blocker. Though the guidelines of some of the guidelines, they say you double it, you triple it, you quadruple it. But believe you me, even these antihistamines, yeah, which where they say is non-sedative, you go on increasing the dose, you are going to get all the side effects of as that. For example, hydroxyzine 10%, and if you're going to give 500 milligrams of some other antihistamine, the side effects are going to be the same, because you increase the dose. Even though the side effects are less, by the sheer quantity of the medicine, the same side effects are going to come up with the other drugs. So you could go for that. And I also strongly believe that these older generation antihistamine, the H1 blockers, the sedating ones, many of them have got anxiolytic action, like Professor Gopinath, and senior people know what they're talking. He says that he would use that. He's no more late Dr. Gopinath, who was the professor of the Calicut Medical College and instrumental for our iDodge starting. A wonderful person, very knowledgeable person. And he said that when he gives it, there's an anxiolytic action of this. So we should not lose out on that. And the sleep, the sedation, the cognition, which is promoted to you, may be true, but they have been tried in normal persons in very small doses. And what we find that is, if antihistamines are taken for, and it's a single dose they have tried, if the same antihistamine is taken for a longer dose, the body adjusts, and the side effects come down. So antihistamines cause more discomfort by the start, stop, rather than by taking it every time continuously. So those things you'll have to tell them. And then if it doesn't work, then you find that already another person has tried the doubling, trebling, and he has tried. It is at that time you got to step away and think of other drug. And one of the first drug to step away is doxepin. It is a tranquilizer. It is a tricyclic antidepressant. It has got antihistaminic action, and it has also got H2 blocker. So it can also block the gastric secretion. So it is a 3-in-1 drug. But then you don't want to give it in higher doses to the older people, because the QT interval, because of that, in them we can go only up to 20 to 30 milligrams. So this can be stepped up. Give the other antihistamines and slot in doxepin and give it as a 10 milligram at night time. Ask them to say that 10 milligram is okay, that is the dose you need. After 5 days, if you are not comfortable, add in one more tablet. After that, still you are getting lesions and you are comfortable, add in one more tablet. After that, come to you. So at that time, you can see at that time, you can slightly increase by 5 milligram by giving, say, 10 milligram in the morning and 25 milligram in the night if required. So doxepin is one of the wonderful drugs which can be used. And ketotifen is useful in case, as I told you, in case of dermographism. It can be tried in other case of urticaria. It is also one of the better drugs to be used in case of Parthenium dermatitis. So this is the mechanism by which the antihistamines act. They prevent the blood vessels, the histamine release, histamine acting on the blood vessels, and they also prevent the acting on the nerve ending, the antihistamines, by which the itching does not occur. So the mechanism is they are a competitive antagonist. In fact, they are selective for the H1 receptors. They are inverse agonist. In other words, they also compete for the receptors, which is why when the concentration goes down, the urticaria comes back. It has got an affinity for the H1 receptors and no affinity, the newer ones, for the other receptors. We had conducted a study to find out, because this was the time when all these various antihistamine came, between levocetirizine, desloratadine, fexopenidine, by doing the histamine wheel test. What we would do is we all volunteered for the test. At that time, of course, it was not so tough wherein we had to get so much ethical committee clearance. So those was not there. So we all used to volunteer. We had guinea pigs in our department, and I was also one of the guinea pigs, not only the others. So we had guinea pigs in the department, and we used to go on having taken antihistamine and then do the prick testing to find out. And we found that all antihistamines are nearly same. Some act a wee bit faster. So this is what happens when you do. You take a orthogonal diameter. Orthogonal diameter means you take a vertical, will take one along the longest axis and then perpendicular to that. That is the orthogonal diameter, and the area of that is said to be the size of the wheel. It is not that you take in one directionally, because in one area you prick, it will go in the laterally. In one area, it will go in a peculiar direction. It has got various shapes. So orthogonal diameter is how you measure in case of urticaria when you induce the wheel. And we did this test with the various antihistamines. After giving the antihistamine, this is only one day, maybe if you take longer, there was. So early onset, we found it fexofenadine, and 6 to 24-hour maximum was with levocetirizine. But then if you increase the number of volunteers, if you increase the number of this thing, or in real life situation, there is nothing much to choose to, all are nearly equally effective. Then the question is, should we combine H1 and H2? If you look through some of the guidelines, they have thrown this out of the window, saying that there is no role, but that is not true. We are not like robo, we're giving 2-3 options, wherein you don't need a doctor. When you have first option is when a person gives, you give newer antihistamine. If they don't work, double it, triple it, four it, then give omalizumab, and then you go and give cyclosporin if still needed. So that robo can do it. We don't require doctors to do such things. Each person is different, each person's priority, side effect. So we are listening to the patient and then giving to the person. So if you find that if this person has got gastric, or if the person has got stress, if there is a stress, there is going to be hyperacidity, and hyperacidity is going to cause more stress. And then the wheal and erythema reduction is also because of the H2 receptors. So you should consider, and this is what we found that, of course, now ranitidine is not available, so you could try famotidine if required. And this is what we can do in these cases. With what we found in these cases, with levocetirizine alone, the wheel size was 3, 2, at 6 hours, 3. Whereas when we combine, you can see that at the 24 hours, when we combined with ranitidine, the wheel size was 1.266 average of the number of the persons, and 3.4. There is a statistically significant difference when we combined it with ranitidine. So we published this, that histamine 2 blocker potentiate the effect of histamine 1 blocker in suppressing the histamine wheel. And Reena, and she is now the professor and head at PSG, and Danya was a PG student at that time with whom we did the test. Then coming to the sedation, you can see that various antihistamine, how much they block go and bind to the receptors in the brain, which is why that causes the sedation. So fexofenadine, it is 120 milligram. What we use is 180. And if you are going to double it, triple it, same for loratadine. If you double it, triple it, naturally it is going to cause more amount of adherence to this thing. So H1 is responsible for which we are giving, is responsible for the itching, flare, erythema, whealing. And erythema and whealing is because of H2. So whealing is by both, and erythema is because of this. So you'll find that when a many person they take antihistamines, they will say that itching is not there, whealing is not there, but redness is there. If you give H2 antihistamine, that redness also is likely to disappear. Then of course, wheat product, I don't know why it has come again. So diet. So a person will come and tell, as I told you right at the beginning, that I am allergic to this, I am allergic. So you have to listen to them. Then you tell them that you have tried stopping that? Yes. You have tried stopping not taking idli? Yes. You have tried stopping the katrika or the brinjal? You have tried stopping the fish? Did it go away? And if it did not go away, it means that is not the cause. Then you will find they are nodding their head. They will nod their head here, but outside again somebody will tell, again they will come and ask you the same question. Every time they will come, they will ask you the same question. And every time you are going to give the same answer. And why not? You are getting paid every time. So are antihistamines harmless? See, it is this way. Histamine causes alertness. Antihistamine reduces that alertness of the brain. So what little goes up, it can cause alertness, which is why when we give an antihistamine to a person, you find that this Alertness is an excessive amount of alertness. So many times you find the person becomes calm. Especially you'll find this is much more obvious in case of atopic dermatitis, where the person first time they will be coming to you, they'll be pulling that, they'll be taking that. In fact, I used to diagnose atopic dermatitis when the person would come and the boy would come, immediately he will put in a magnifying glass or my dermoscope will want to see what it is, all those sort of things. If they do that, very often they are atopic dermatitis. So when they come second time and you have treated them with antihistamines and topicals and they calm down, you'll find that this alertness or the excessive alertness or the overactiveness goes down. And if they're feeling sleepy, the way to overcome is either a chocolate bar or a cup of coffee. So if a person is feeling little sedated after taking antihistamine, you tell them to have a cup of coffee. That sort of. I read it somewhere, so don't ask me from where I got. After that, I'm not able to find that site. Even I searched hard for it. But if you find out, then let me know where you find that. But a cup of coffee or a chocolate can help overcome the drowsiness which you get because of antihistamine. So these are the recommendations by the Gallen recommendation, where they say start antihistamine, go for second generation, double. The American one is little more like us. They do have room for the older antihistamines. They do have, they're much more open to the idea of doxepin, hydroxyzine, whereas the European guidelines, somehow they trust omalizumab much more than, and omalizumab fails in nearly 40%. There are early responders, there are late responders, and it is not a permanent drug, but still that is the drug which the European guidelines swear by. Then the third line, cyclosporin. Cyclosporin is a wonderful drug. Cyclosporin. And then they say it is nephrotoxic. It raises the BP. But then you don't have to give it at the recommended dose. You can give it at a lower dose. At lower dose also it works. At lower dose, you do the renal function, you check the BP, you check the potassium. Nothing happens to it. You can start off cyclosporin daily and then go for alternate days or then go for 2 days a week of say Mondays and Thursdays you can give cyclosporin. You'll find nothing happen. Even steroids can be used in similar way. If a person cannot afford cyclosporin, you could use steroids also in the same way. Initially give it for 1 week daily and then change it to twice a week, especially the long-acting steroid with anti-inflammatory action. And then change from long-acting antihistaminic steroid to short-acting steroid like methylprednisolone. You could do that. And they also act very much like cyclosporin. Tacrolimus is a drug which we should be trying. It also acts on the calcineurin inhibitor. And this is the reason, because you see, when you go to the pathogenesis of urticaria, T cell is virtually not visible anywhere. It is the basophils which are visible. It is the mast cells which are visible. But then cyclosporin is acting. The proof is there in the pudding. So T cells also get recruited, which is why cyclosporin is acting in these cases. Urticaria. Then of course IVIG, I have not tried that. Dapsone can be tried if you find that there is a more amount of neutrophils on biopsy. You can do a biopsy in some cases, and if there are, but then Dapsone we are all now little afraid of. So sulfasalazine would be a better choice than Dapsone, but that also can rarely. So you have to do a G6PD, follow them up. I have this principle of doing a complete liver function test if I am giving Dapsone. Then I keep repeating at 15 days interval. In quite a few cases, I have been able to detect the hepatitis and I'm able to stop. And I sort of pride myself that I prevented them from going to a fulminant hepatitis or Dapsone syndrome. I may be wrong, but then when I find that there is alteration of the liver function test after about 7 to 10 days of Dapsone, then I tend to stop it. I have not conducted a study. There is no way that study can be conducted. Hydroxychloroquine is a drug which you can try if you are getting ANA positive or something. Mycophenolate mofetil, I have not tried in urticaria. Methotrexate, I have tried. We do not know how it acts. It also acts predominantly on the T cells. But then, as I told you, T cells are involved. UVB also can reduce the Langerhans cells. It is concerned. It is there associated with the presentation of antigens. So all those things. So UVB is known, and of course biologicals. Biologicals I have seen them being used. Not one of my favorite. In fact, if I require biologicals, I refer it to the persons who are much more familiar with biologicals, or I send it to the institution where I was working. When I was there, I used to use. Otherwise, I'm not comfortable because rarely anaphylactic reactions can occur, and we don't want that. Then, but there are people like Kiran Godse and all. They administer it right in their OP, and they are very confident. And then he permits them to administer it themselves also. So if you want to get confidence with drugs like omalizumab, they are the right persons to talk to. I wouldn't be the right person to talk to. Narrowband phototherapy can be tried. I have tried this mostly in case of solar urticaria, of course, in even polymorphic light eruption, but that is a different indication. Solar urticaria, if you give for some time the phototherapy, about say 15 days, 20 days, then for another 3 to 4 months, they do not get urticaria. But then this is an observation. I have not had enough patients to try and conduct a study on that. The lymphocytes, I told you, the cyclosporin binds to the cyclophilin activity in the calcineurin, and that is how it acts, preventing this thing. Then, of course, steroids. Steroids, you give, any person is happy when they take steroids, but then there are side effects. Unfortunately, in India, once you write steroids, then the person is going to get the prescription of steroid by himself. He is going to misuse, abuse, and overuse it. So we have not learned the art of giving steroid, or till now that free availability of medicine is one of the greatest reasons as to why you should hesitate or try your best to avoid steroids in these persons, because most of them will take it. And unfortunately, many people believe that low dose steroid is harmless. That is not true. Low dose steroids also can lead to secondary adrenocortical depression, and if taken for a long time, it leads to withdrawal symptoms. And why is this important in the case of urticaria? This is important in case of urticaria, not only in urticaria, wherever, be it airborne contact dermatitis, be it any atopic dermatitis, wherever you have given steroid for a long time, the body is not producing the endogenous steroid. And so when you stop it, neither the body is going to produce, nor are you going to give it, or the patient getting it from outside. Slowly the withdrawal symptoms set in. They don't come immediately. They occur over a period. Each one comes. And what happens? These persons think that the primary condition is becoming worse. A person with urticaria who has taken steroid, who has stopped steroid, will think his urticaria has become more. A person with airborne contact dermatitis who has taken low dose steroid, and somebody told me, don't take steroid, and they stopped that, they will find that they have stopped steroids, and over a period of time, then they will think that the airborne contact dermatitis has become more, and once again they will start. So this cycle, they will start taking steroid, and this cycle leads to the various problems which we get. We can see weight loss, hypoglycemia, fatigability, and sometimes it can even lead to adrenal crisis if you don't recognize. So if a person comes to you with urticaria who has been on steroids for a long time, you'll have to take a history on that. That should not be missed. You can miss urticaria, you can miss giving antihistamine, but a person has stopped steroids and is getting urticaria, or is complaining to you about urticaria, is this thing. You should not miss the history of taking steroid for a long time. They would have taken, in the homeopathy would have given, somebody else would have given, they would have self-medicated, they would have taking it without the consent of other persons. They would be just taking the drug. So you will have to go on asking. So these are the various conditions. These are the persons whom we tried. There are hundreds of patients, but we conducted this study on 9, because the drug, which is quite expensive for trying. So we did a baseline steroid the study in these cases, and we found that in these persons who are taking low dose steroids, even interrupted low dose steroid for a long time, you will find that the serum cortisol levels are low in that case. And when serum cortisol levels are low, obviously the withdrawal symptoms are going to come. So you can, so can we stop steroids in that case? We cannot stop them abruptly. We have to find out. So you try to withdraw the steroid. One way to do is, nowadays, unfortunately, we are not getting syntropin. We used to get at that time. So if we inject 0.4 milligram syntropin intramuscular and then withdraw the sample, then you'll find that the level goes up. So if the level comes to near normal, or at least it can be stimulated, then it gives you a clue that in this person, we can withdraw steroids. In the absence of that, you will have to start withdrawing steroids very, very gradually. So you will have to reduce by 1/4 tablet and then half tablet. So I find that the easiest way is either you go to syrup or you go to methylprednisolone tablet, which can be broken. It can be broken into 4 parts, and then you can go on removing 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. These are the 2 drugs, either the syrup of Omnacotil or whatever you are having, and or with this is the drug by which steroids can. And this has to be given twice. You have to give it in the morning and again evening, because they are short-acting steroids. If a person is very low and is not able to, in those persons, you cannot withdraw steroids. Steroid is a permanent part of armamentarium in the treatment of urticaria. Antihistamines or other drugs are in addition to this, but not by itself. And in some cases, rarely they do recover after months. Some cases don't recover in this. Then as I told you, the biologics are come. Various biologics are available, which are there acting at the IgE level, omalizumab, and the latest one is legiluzumab, which is said to be having much more binding capacity. It binds to the IgE in the circulation, not the one that has bound over there. Then, of course, TNF alpha inhibitors has been found to be effective. Rituximab has been found to be effective in some cases by acting on the B cells, although why it should act intravenous immunoglobulin. But having said that, I have seen cases of failure to omalizumab coming to me, improving with the regular sort of treatment. But then it is still possible that those persons who consider themselves as failure might be late responders, or possibly they required not 300 milligram, they required 600 milligram, or they required twice weekly of the omalizumab. They might have responded, but it's an expensive drug, and giving the drug twice weekly or increasing the dose is awfully expensive. So omalizumab, you give every 4 weeks, but if it doesn't respond, you can give every 2 weeks, you can give, or 600 milligram you can give. So that is how you go on increasing the dose. IVIG, of course, blocks the F1 receptors. Much more useful in case of toxic epidermal necrolysis is where IVIG has basically been used. And in urticaria, there are studies, I haven't used it. Rituximab, same binding. TNF alpha inhibitors. I'm not going to dwell on this. All these various drugs has been known like there are, what happens, the doctor gets desperate, the patient gets desperate, so let us try this, and then they find that it is effective in some of those cases and they get reported. So my talk is coming to a conclusion, and as I told you, urticaria is a tough nut to crack. You have to turn the person to live with it. You tell them that the drug does not make it go. You should take the drug. In Tamil, I tell them, Vandalu Varatalu, Varama irkartukaha, cell phone la alarm vechi matra edukkanum. In other words, irrespective of whether you're getting or not, you keep the alarm in the cell phone and take it, because this has got only, if you take the drug, it will prevent from coming. And then you tell them that you come to me, I will lower the dose. It is a cat and mouse game which I'm going to play with this, and I will lower the drugs. And then it is possible. Then people will ask, how long is it going to last? I tell them that I cannot really predict. It can go off in 3 to 6 months. It can go off in 1 year. It can go off in 2 years. It can take 5 to 6 years. But if there are about 100 patients, an approximate average will be 2 years. And what I tell them is that, in almost all cases, I have found that with antihistamines alone, urticaria becomes well. So rarely, some persons may require biologics. They require biologics and antihistamines, other drugs, and antihistamines and cyclosporin. Definitely is a combination. Steroids and antihistamines also I try frequently. And other thing is the difference between the urticarial vasculitis and acute urticaria, or chronic idiopathic urticaria, which they say more than 24 hours. Again, if it exceeds 24 hours, they say that it is vasculitis. That may not be always true, because in some cases, if because of an allergen, if a late phase reaction occurs, then it is possible that the late phase reaction is going to persist for 24 to 48 hours. And the late phase reaction also will show neutrophils and histopathology, will also show some degree of vasculitis when you do the biopsy. So biopsy may not be able to differentiate this completely, unless, so that is possibly the reason why in some of these cases where we find that this urticarial vasculitis also responds to omalizumab, because it actually acts against IgE. The late phase reaction also may respond to IgE, which is why it acts. So that is about urticaria. And I have said something which might be a little bit controversial, but it makes you think. If it makes you question, that is good enough. And I always say, right to differ is individuals. Do not believe what you read in the textbook. Do not believe what you read in the journal. Just because somebody quotes to you in the journal that they have said this, it doesn't mean that what they have said is right. Because those journals, there are ways, publication, what sort of population was studied, how much population was studied, those things you don't know. The person who is quoting it is going to quote only the conclusion.
or many of the journals, the conclusion may not be. So you believe on your experience and treat the urticaria patients, each patient separately and not by any given algorithm. That is what we are trained for. Thank you very much.